Hey everyone, and welcome back to season 2 of the Ghost Biker Garage. We've got some really cool and exciting things going on this year, but first and foremost, hope everyone has had a wonderful holiday season as well as, great new year, starting the new year off right. First show of the season. Excited to be back. And even more exciting news, we're broadcasting on 3 platforms here. Not only are we live on Facebook, but we're also live on YouTube this time. So I can't tell you how excited I am about that, because I know that was kind of one of those things last year. We would come on live here on Facebook, and then later on that evening, we would upload it to YouTube. So I'm so excited to be able to interact with my friends that follow the channel here on YouTube. So we're also on My Mix TV, broadcasting there. The episode will drop on Saturday nights after this. So yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Got a great house here. Just want to remind everyone what we're going to do is we'll address the comments, but because we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about, and I don't want to end up interrupting our guest while we're talking. Put your comments and questions here, and as soon as we get to a brief moment in the discussion, we'll pull your comments up and your questions, and we'll get those. And so I just want to take a minute and say hello to a few people over here in the chat room. Hey, Dr. Sumner, UFO Bigfoot, Janet, Eric, Jim Cody. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in on these different platforms. I know we had a great season last season with season 4 of Ghost Biker Explorations. You guys are still bearing with me on the season finale. That's going to drop here in January, and it's going to be a really interesting story as well as interesting investigation. So we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. But right now, I want to go ahead and get to the introduction of tonight's guest, because we really do have a whole lot to talk about. And I'm just so excited that he is on here with us to share some of his different stories and different things from his travels. So I'm going to get right to the bio here. My guest tonight, Steve Stockton, is a veteran outdoorsman, author, and has been investigating the unexplained for over 35 years. Originally from the mountains of East Tennessee, so he's a fellow East Tennessean, y'all. Steve has traveled all over the country to many parts of the world and now makes his home in Portland, Oregon, near the wilds and Bigfoot country of the Pacific Northwest. Steve cites his influences as the Gypsy Witch, his grandmother, who told him multitudes of legends and stories as a small child, as well as authors such as Frank Edwards, John Keel, Charles Fort, Lauren Coleman, Ivan Sanderson, Colin Wilson, and Nick Redfern. His published books include Strange Things in the Woods and More Strange Things in the Woods, collections of true paranormal encounters, as well as the autobiographical My Strange World, where he talks about his own experiences dating back to his childhood. Recently, he has written the National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And if you guys have been following my show, you know that that's something that I'm extremely interested in, are the missing and disappearances in the National Park Service. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring Mr. Stockton on, and we'll go ahead and get started with the discussion. Hey, Steve.
Hey there, Miranda. Thanks for that introduction. Wow, that's great. I wish I had a better show for you now.
Well, like I said, I can't think of a better way to kick this season off than have you on, because, you're quite an interesting fella.
Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Well, I always love having fellow East Tennesseans on.
Yeah. Your voice sounds like home to me. I've been out here on the West Coast about 15 years, but I'd like to get back to the mountains someday. Appalachia gets in your blood.
Wonderful. Yeah. And, your background of storytelling, I've been reading your book this afternoon and trying to kind of catch up. And, I love your style of storytelling and your style of writing. I mean, it's not only very informative, but extremely easy and pleasant to read. I mean, it's like having a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That's the way it's intended. I try to keep it, I don't want to say simple, but just uncluttered.
Mhm.
And it is, it's like me telling the story on paper.
I love how you tell the story and then you also go in and, tell details about how you relate to it as far as like, especially what I was reading was the stories from the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah.
And so I love how you go in and tell your story. But let's go ahead and let's kind of talk about your story, how you got started, and all that you've done during this 35 years of investigating the paranormal.
Wow, it's probably been more than that now. Saw my first full body apparition when I was 5 years old, and didn't scare me, but it just kind of piqued my interest. And like, what was that? And that started a lifelong journey into looking into things. I started out looking for answers, but the more I do this, the longer I've done it, I found out that there are no real answers, and it only leads to more questions. So now it's the quest for the next question, and that's part of the fun. I don't think it would be half as interesting if we had all the answers. That would take a lot of the mystery and intrigue out of it. At least it would be for me.
I have to completely agree with that because, that's all the fun. I know my theories with the paranormal, it changes with every investigation I do. And
Yeah.
so, I'm with you. If I could know the answer, I don't know if I would be as intrigued by the mystery of it.
Mhm. Yeah, the fun is in the chase, definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you what is your area of interest the most in? Because you do such a variety. Would you say it's the history, the mystery, the storytelling, the missing cases, the paranormal cryptids? What is really your favorite that
Oh
got you?
gosh, it's a little bit of everything, a mixed bag. Right now, I'm concentrating mainly on the missing persons and the supernatural aspect in a lot of those cases. Now, not everything is supernatural, but there's some cases in particular that just don't make a lot of sense and seem to favor something strange going on and not just a regular disappearance where somebody wandered off and got lost.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's what I find so fascinating about it as well. I kinda stumbled onto those missing, 411 and missing, national park stories, kind of by accident when I was doing some different research for one of my episodes, and then I found I ended up staying up most of the night, sitting there listening to some of these different stories, and
Mhm.
for me, I'm always out traveling and nothing really creeps me out more than those stories. I don't know why. I'm not sure if it's just the disappearing, or I mean just the disappearance and never seen again, or just the mystery surrounding it. But those stories actually frighten me more than any type of paranormal story I've ever done.
Yeah, indeed. It'll put you off going into the woods. That's for sure. I've hiked all over the Appalachians and out here on the Pacific Crest Trail and some of those places, but not as much anymore. It's just I don't know. There's something out there that doesn't like people in the woods, or maybe likes them a little too well. But it's you have to be a lot more careful now. I'm used to solo hike. I've never through hiked the Appalachian Trail, but I've hiked on it in every state that it goes through except for Maine. And I guess the longest hike I've ever done was from Georgia to Virginia.
Mhm,
But I wouldn't do that now. Not alone. After some of these stories that I've covered, some of the cases of people that just literally walk around a bend and never seen again. I mean, no trace whatsoever. That's the ones that are the most frightening to me. That there's something, be it uh, an animal predator or a human predator or something supernatural that can take a human and not
mhm.
leave any evidence at all.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because I know there are some different theories and classifications. Can we talk a little bit about some of these, a few of these, I guess, characteristics of some of these disappearances?
Yeah, there's many synchronicities, I like to call them. It's
Hmm.
too happens too often to be coincidences. People wearing red are more likely to go missing, which you'd think that'd be just the opposite. You'd think somebody wearing red would be easier to spot. People of Germanic descent tend to go missing more so than people that aren't. Um, on the IQ spectrum, it's like both ends are covered. A lot of people that go missing are on the autism spectrum, but then also there are a lot of people that are very, very learned and have PhDs and things like that. Um, People that are very healthy tend to go missing often. Runners and marathoners and mountain climbers and things like that. Of course, that's to be expected to some degree with the hobby that they have, but
Sure.
the cases are still so strange because those are people that are in the woods a lot, familiar with the woods, know how to handle themselves in those situations, and then just poof, gone.
Yeah. Yeah, we've actually got a lady on here, Monica, who she says that her stepdaughter, when she was at Hot Springs National Park, there was at least one body found. Not sure about disappearances. Um, what are the statistics out of these folks that are that go missing that are actually found? What's the statistics on that?
There's at any given time, there's something like 6,000 people that are missing from national parks, and there's just a small percentage of those that are found. Uh, Fully recovered, where it's been either animal predation or an accident, misadventure, things like that. It's frightening when you think about the odds. Now, a lot of people they're just at the missing in general, not in the national parks. Those figures are a lot higher, but you have people that go missing on purpose, people that run away, people that want to disappear. Things like that don't really factor into it because there are teenagers that have run away several times in a year, and each one of those counts as a missing case. So there's some fluctuation there in the numbers. But the really interesting part of it is the national park
Hmm.
stuff. I mean, people go missing in the cities and urban areas too, but there's just something extra creepy about the national park disappearances to me, anyway.
And I'm pulling up the so forgive me for just a second because I'm pulling up the missing 411 cluster map. Um, let's see. I know there's a lot here in Tennessee where I'm from, but I'm looking to pull up just
Mhm.
the complete one here. And it may have actually been updated since this one, but okay, let me pull that up there. Uh, since I've found it now. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna see if that'll let me. Whoops. I want to pull up the full one there. Um, and I cannot get that any larger. Um, see if we can see that. So that seems to be what mostly parks and cave systems.
Mhm. Yeah, if you overload that with or overlay that with a map of where most limestone caverns and cave systems are, it almost lines up perfectly. Especially on the East Coast there in Tennessee and the Great Smokies. There are a lot of limestone caves all the way up through Appalachia. And then again, out west, got Yosemite. That's the second most visited national park. A lot of disappearances there, a huge cluster there. Big one in Nevada. And can't really see it on that one, but up in the Pacific Northwest out here where I'm at, a lot of missing in Washington State, specifically around Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, and Olympia in that area.
What area would, from your research, have you found has the most? And I guess that kind of depends on the square footage and stuff, but
Yeah, definitely. I think Yosemite has the most missing. I know Lake Mead in Nevada, there's a lot missing there, but again, that could be accidental drownings and things like that. Whereas I focus more on the hikers and the unusual
sure.
cases, campers, and things like that disappear.
Gotcha. Well, we've got a couple questions here. Let's see. Dr. Chris Sumner says, "How has your research been received? It seems like more people are becoming aware of this. Is it just that more people are willing to talk about it now?"
Yeah, I think it's more people are willing to talk about it now. You have people like Dave Politis who's been looking into this for some time, and the more you boost the signal and raise the awareness, I think the more people are cognizant of it. There are people that still don't believe it. That they're like, oh well, an animal got them, or this, that, or the other. But there's, an animal doesn't eat everything. They don't eat your clothes and your supplies, your tent, your backpack, things like that.
Yeah, and haven't a lot of those folks, that they found remnants of, haven't they found that, like, they're missing, like, the articles of clothing, like, they're folded and kind of laid off to the side and or
Yeah,
missing, like, a shoe or
oftentimes
something?
clothing will be found folded up, uh, shoes, and that's another thing where they find the shoes where people have gone missing, especially in the wintertime. There was a case I covered recently where a seasoned hunter was out and had went to hike. He'd left his hunting party to hike to another cabin where they had a cache of supplies. Missed the turnoff, even though he had a GPS. Ended up taking his boots off and walked 12 miles in the snow, and then sat down and froze to death. Died under a tree within sight of a working ranch and very close to a busy road. So
Wow.
what would cause that? Why would you take your shoes off in over a foot of snow and below freezing temperatures?
Yeah, because I mean, you hear in some cases when people try to explain things away that, it messes with the mind, where they start to they get they get frozen, they start to take their clothes off and such, but it that to me, that doesn't make sense in those cases.
Yeah, well, you have the paradoxical undressing. That's where the colder you get, the body loses heat faster and you feel warm, and people will undress because of that. But I don't think that's the case in every situation, certainly not
Mhm,
in warmer weather, although you can get hypothermia in the spring or the summertime if you're wet and there's a good breeze blowing, and especially after dark. But I don't know. It's just there's something about like to the clothing left behind, or sometimes it's found in a tree or beneath the tree, like you said, neatly folded. Anyway,
mhm.
that makes no sense. If somebody takes the time to remove their clothing, they're not going to bother to fold them up and put them carefully on a rock. Some of the other things that happen often, people are usually found near berry fields or boulder fields,
Mhm.
and in a lot of times it's places that have already been searched heavily, sometimes multiple times, and the body will show no signs of being out in the weather. There's been cases where people were missing for months, but when they found them, the body only appeared to have been there for a few days in a place that had already been searched. Almost like something is taunting people, like this area's been searched. Okay, we're going to put the body there for you to find, so we can just kind of rub your nose in it.
Yeah, I actually just listened to, one of your videos, and we'll get into your website and YouTube channels here in just a little bit, but I was actually just listening to one about, the lady and her 90-year-old father who had, been hiking, and it said they had found him, what, like 500 yards, from where they had been searching, and, I mean, when they actually found his remains, it had been,
Mhm.
like, only 500 yards away from an already searched area.
Yeah. And that's one of those, it's hard to say. I mean, somebody that old probably
Yeah,
doesn't have a lot of business out hiking anyway.
yeah.
But yeah, it's about 500 yards away in an area that's already been searched. That's a common thing. We're usually nearby, within a mile or two, and place that's been heavily searched more than once.
Okay, well, to actually kind of, follow up on the question that, Dr. Sumner had about people willing to talk about it, are the national park folks willing to talk about this, or is that something they're kinda hush hush about?
Well, they're kind of hush hush about it. I mean, especially places like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is the most visited national park in the country. Even in 2020, with everything going on, the Smokies saw over 12 million visitors. So yeah, if you've got something taking children or eating people or however you want to term it, that's not good for tourism. And tourism is what makes those places thrive. I mean, without the tourists, places like Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, those would all be ghost towns.
Absolutely. Yeah, bad PR. Um, we got a comment here from Eric, and he says, question for later in the show, but we'll go ahead and get to it now. Wondering what your thoughts are on the Bart Schleyer story. And he says he's pretty sure you know know the story of an expert bear hunter.
Yeah, we covered that one on Missing Persons and Mysteries. Got a
Okay.
video about him.
Okay. Do you have any particular thoughts on that one? I know
Um,
we want folks to go and watch the video, but
yeah, it's hard to say. It's one of those things. I mean, again, experienced with bears and around bears, but there's a lot of cases where I don't know if the bears get the jump on people or what happens, but there's been people with sidearms and bear spray that never got a chance to take it out. So there's one school of thought that, well, had something already happened to them before the bear found them. So, I mean, this was somebody that, was familiar with bear and hunted bear and knew their habits and how to listen for them and watch for them and stuff, and then still ended up being gotten by the bear. But again, don't know all the circumstances there.
yeah.
But it's an unusual case for sure.
We've got Jim Cody here says, "Hey Steve, fellow Carnes graduate here,"
Hey, go
and
Beavers!
he said the Smoky Mountains have a number of unsolved missing persons and some unusual cases.
Yeah, indeed, and that was really how my interest in missing persons started. 1969, Father's Day, Dennis Martin went missing. And I was living in Knoxville at the time. I was just a few months younger than Dennis. I think he was 6 going on 7, and I was 5 going on 6. And that case just really stuck with me. That my 5-year-old mind there, that was the first time I wrapped my head around the fact that, sometimes bad things happen to kids, and a kid can go missing and never be seen again. And I followed that story religiously. There were 2 papers in Knoxville at the time. The morning paper was the Knoxville Journal. Evening paper was the Knoxville News Sentinel. And somewhere, I think my brother has them, I've got 2 scrapbooks full of clippings that I cut out. Followed that case for years and years and years. And that one, they literally, his father watched him go behind a patch of brush and never saw him again. And there's a lot of conjecture about that one. It's one of the strangest cases out of all of them. All that factored in. The Green Berets showed up to help look for him, which normally that doesn't happen.
Odd,
I mean,
yeah.
the Green Berets don't look for lost children. The FBI got involved right away. At that time, it was the biggest manhunt the Smokies had ever seen, and there was no real trace of him found. There was one footprint or shoe print that they thought might have been his, but there was also some other people in the area that had some kids that were wearing the same kind of shoes, so they don't know if it was him or not. Then there was another family around the same time in a different part of the park, a Key family. They'd ask a ranger where they might be able to see a bear, and they
Mhm.
were in that area and thought, well, at first what they thought was a bear turned out it was what they described as a rugged, possibly hairy looking man carrying something over its shoulder, something red over its shoulder, running up a holler, as they say there in East Tennessee. And this was right after they had heard a blood curdling scream. And the FBI kind of poo pooed that, didn't even really discuss it much, didn't even have the people come back and show where they'd saw this thing. Instead, they met them halfway just to get the story. And that offended Dennis Martin's father, and he never forgave the FBI or the local press for that matter because they kept that from him. But the
Mm.
FBI claimed that there was no way that Dennis could have made it from Spence Field, where he was there above Cades Cove, down to this area where the people saw the hairy man running up the hill with something over his shoulder. But Dennis's father went back and actually timed it out and found that it would indeed be possible for a child to make it in that amount of time, and probably even more so if an adult or some sort of large bipedal person, creature, whatever was carrying him over their shoulder and running.
Mhm.
So just a lot of strange circumstances with that one. And then the FBI field agent that was over that case took his own life in a very spectacular fashion in Knoxville. A few
Ah,
years later, walked into a crowded nightclub called Caddy's on Kingston Pike in Knoxville, and took his service weapon out and took himself out in the middle of the dance floor. And I
wow.
don't know that that was related to the Dennis Martin case, but that was said he was in charge of that, and apparently it bothered him a lot.
Wow. I didn't know about that ending. The Dennis Martin story was the first that I had actually heard, and of course, years after, like I said, I've only really become real fascinated with it in the last couple years, and, that was the first one I saw, and so then I started looking and was really quite amazed at just how many disappearances and how many occurrences have happened here in East Tennessee and, over in the Smoky Mountain region of, North Carolina, Southern Virginia, and Tennessee. So,
Mm.
just fascinating.
Yeah, but Dennis was the one that hooked me on the strange missing cases from childhood. In my little 5-year-old mind, I was thinking, well, we don't live that far from the Smokies. We used to go there a lot on the weekends. So I got out on the country road where we lived and rode my Schwinn Stingray up and down the road looking for him, and
Oh.
left some food out for him. Just one of those things you do as a kid. And
Mhm.
then the next one that really stuck with me was I think it's in, I want to say 78. I don't have the information in front of me. It's late 70s, I believe. Trina Gibson went missing. She was a student at Bearden High School, which was a crosstown rival. Had somebody from Carnes, where I went to school here in the chat. Bearden was one of our rivals there in West Knoxville. And she worked at Westtown Mall. There was a
Mhm.
cafeteria there called Morrison's.
Mhm.
And my parents used to like to go there and eat. And she was the girl that would carry your trays to the table, and she actually carried the food to the table a couple of times. And she'd gone to the Smokies. It was with a school group. I think it was a biology class, and just there's a lot of strange circumstances with that too. Supposedly, they didn't even know where they were going until they were on the bus and on the way. Now, when I was a kid, I went through the Knox County school system just like she did. Anytime we ever went on a field trip, you had a signed permission slip from with your
Mhm.
parents' signature on there, told where you were going, when you were leaving, when you'd be back. But apparently, it didn't happen in this case. But there's a lot of strange things around that case too. There was a boy that she went to school with that kind of had an extreme crush on her to the point of stalking her. Tried to break in her house one night and was shot in the leg by her mother, and he had been put in a juvenile facility. He had just gotten out right before she disappeared. And there was one story that supposedly his car was seen following the school bus up to the Smokies. They'd gone up to Klingman's Dome, which
Mm.
is the highest point in the Smokies. She'd walked with several different groups, and toward the end of the day, they were headed back to the parking lot. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she just kind of broke away from the group and started walking. They saw her kind of hunch down and look at something in the woods off the trail, and then step off the trail into the woods. And that was the last time anybody ever saw her. And in that area where she stepped off, there was okay, are you kidding me? Put it in there. Gibson case was 76. I knew it was sometime in the 70s. But the only thing they found in the woods there was part of consumed beer and some cigarette butts, which matched the type of cigarette butts they later found in the parking lot. So there's some conjecture there that somebody
Mhm.
may have taken her, or she left with somebody, or the guy that her mom had shot decided to seek revenge. And that case destroyed the whole family. And turned out years later, I found out that my niece was friends with her younger sister, Tina. And
Okay.
I was talking about the book I was working on. My niece says, "Hey, my friend's sister disappeared in the Smokies." And I said, "Oh, who's your friend?" And she said, "Tina Gibson." I'm like, "Oh, you got to let me talk to her." So I
Wow.
actually got to go and talk to her. And sadly, she passed away. She basically drank herself to death just because of everything that went on. Said it destroyed the whole family. The parents fought, argued, got divorced. Um, they would say things to her like, "We wish you were the one that had disappeared," and things like that. Just horrible,
Wow.
horrible things to say, especially to a kid. But,
Yeah.
I sat and talked to her for a while, and she said, In my mind's eye, I like to think that Trini ran away with a boyfriend that we didn't know about. The parents were strict and wasn't the most loving home environment. She said, I'd like to think that she's somewhere in sunny Southern California with her boyfriend under a different name and living the life she's always wanted. She said, but in my heart of hearts, I don't feel that she ever left the mountain alive. So
Yeah.
there you go. But there's no trace of her was ever found. Although I would be interested to see now with the DNA advances and things, if they still have those cigarette butts and beer can that they collected, I would like to see those tested and see what's found on that. There's a lady I know that has a website who has every bit of information you could ever want to know about Trina Gibson in that case. It's called Canadian Girl 77, and the girl is GURL. And
I'll put that here in the Canadian Girl 77.
yeah, GURL girl. I've had her as a guest on my show before, and she knows that case inside out, backwards, upside down. She's even had death threats because
Wow.
of some of the things. And she's talked to classmates. She's got copies of the yearbooks and things like that. She's done a lot of investigation to it. She thinks that she knows who did it, but she can't say. Now, she told me some things privately that I can't repeat that made a lot of sense, but it is what it is.
Sure. Sure.
And
And would oh, go ahead.
I was going to say then the next strange disappearance in the Smokies was Thelma Pauline Polly Melton, and I think that one, I believe she went missing in '80. I'm getting the dates mixed up in my head here. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but she was camping. They had a trailer there in Dudley Creek campground, and they would go and stay there for certain times, so many weeks a year. And she was with friends, other ladies that she knew from the campground there. She walked just ahead of her friends. They were out hiking and smoking cigarettes. She just picked up the pace, went around the bend, and they never saw her again either. And medication and things that she needed was left behind. Her husband had no idea what had happened to her. And the hiking and skiing club that I was part of actually participated in the search for her. So, so far, a lot of these cases in the Smokies, I've got a personal interest in it. I'm out 5 years old beating the bushes looking for Dennis Martin. I knew Trina Gibson from Westtown Mall. I helped look for Polly Melton. Again, one of those never found, but there's conjecture that
Mhm.
she did pull a runner. Her husband was about 20 years older than she was. I think she was in her 50s at the time, and his health was really starting to fail. So people think she just hooked up with somebody else and disappeared. And back then, you could do that. I mean, in Tennessee at that time, the driver's license were just paper, as a green paper, didn't no photo or anything on there, just had your name and address typed on it. So it was easy back then before the advent of the internet and before computers took over everything. To now, you'd leave a digital paper trail a mile long if you tried to disappear. Although people still manage to do it, it's just not as easy as it used to be.
Yeah,
So,
and it's an interesting point you said there. I've watched several different documentaries on folks who, not necessarily missing in national parks, but just missing in general from around that 75 to 80, 85 year period. Where there it was often that kids would run away.
mhm,
And I've heard some different interviews with some of the family where it's like, I come from a very tight-knit family, and so, it's one of those things where you would hear the story about some of these folks, and it was like, well, they may have ran off. A couple of 'em, they really didn't question, they kind of, I guess, accepted the fact, and that seemed like and maybe I just watched a couple different interviews that, that's what happened, but
mhm,
it seemed like that, they did search and they did look, but then it was just kind of like, well,
mhm.
they ran off. There just didn't seem to be as much of a urgency. I don't know. It was kind of interesting to me, something that I
Yeah,
noticed in
it
those.
just things are just so different back then. I mean, kids played outside. Just,
Mhm.
I didn't have to be until after dark, and things like that. And I don't think kids play outside anymore, not like they used to. But we rode our bikes all over creation, and you didn't hear too often of kids being taken or abducted. And now, just every time you turn on the news, and a lot of that is just stranger abductions, non family
Mhm.
abductions. And one thing we're starting to look into is the human trafficking and thing that's going on
Yeah.
in places like the around the Great Lakes area and on up into Canada, what they call the Highway of Tears. There are hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of missing Indigenous women that
Mhm.
there's no account for, that they think have either just been flat out murdered or taken into slavery, as it were, and trafficked to somewhere else. And you have all those ships in and out of the Great Lakes area and international
Mhm.
cargo. They could be a long way away before anybody even knew they were gone. And sadly, a lot of those women, particularly ones that live on the reservation and don't have a lot of means, they hitchhike, and
Mhm.
that's just recipe for disaster. There, a teenage person, period, out hitchhiking. Uh, that's just recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Well, is there one specific case, and again, I know there's so many, is there one specific case that resonates with you as being the most baffling?
Oh gosh, there's so many. It would be hard to pick one. Uh, we covered some recently with we did a documentary on the smiley face killer theory. The
Yeah.
full version of that's up over on Missing Persons and Mysteries. And there was one particular case where a person had disappeared. I think they'd left a party. Was later found dead, but standing upright in a pond with water just below their shoulders. They said it looked like somebody just had waded out into the pond and stood there and died, but hadn't drowned
Hmm.
necessarily. They don't not really sure what the circumstances were. And there was another case that really sticks with me, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was working on a film crew that was shooting a documentary, and suddenly he jumped down off a little bluff there where they were, and ran off just as hard as he could go. They never saw him again. They don't know what happened to him, why he ran. They did find like his shirt hanging on a fence, and one of his boots. And other than that, no sign of him. And one of the interesting theories I've heard about the shoes and boots, that
Mhm.
if it were people doing this, and that's one of the theories. There's so many different theories. There's Bigfoot, there's aliens, there's supernatural entities, there's the Fae theory, which talks about the stuff from the fairy realm that was almost a religion. In the Celtic times, the fairies steal people, and that's kind of where the berry bushes and things come in. But if it were a human, and say you wanted to hunt another human,
Mhm.
take their shoes and turn them loose in the wilderness, in the woods. I mean, they could run, but they're not going to get very far. They're not going to get away, but it would be more of a sporting chance and less like shooting fish in a barrel. Probably a bad choice of words there, but there's people that believe it's something like that. That it's especially with the smiley face killers, that it's a killer or a group of killers that somehow coordinate these activities. And all these young men that they pull out of the water, a lot of times they'll have GHB in their system, so they've been drugged.
Uh-huh.
And but with all the cameras and stuff, there's lots of footage of people going into bars, no footage of them ever coming out, yet they're found in the water. And that's usually on or near college campuses where there's a body of water. Boston is one good example. And you have that in England too. In Manchester, they've got the canals there, and they have a killer that they refer to locally as the Pusher. And telling you, I've been to the UK. They have more surveillance cameras there than what I saw in Las Vegas. I mean, there's every corner. It seems like there's a surveillance camera, and yet they have footage of these guys going into bars. But there's yet to be one piece of video of anybody throwing somebody in the water. They just turn up in the water. It's almost like what they have out here, the Shanghai tunnels, which are legendary in Portland. You can go and tour those. And back during the shipping days, the wild and woolly days in the 1800s, when Portland was a big shipping port, people would literally get shanghaied. That's where that terms came from. They go into a bar or a brothel, they get slipped a Mickey. And that was one of the things they would do, is take their shoes from them. And
Hmm.
when you tour those tunnels down there, it's really sandy, but there's broken glass that's still down there. So
Ah,
you've been drugged, you've been dropped down into a tunnel. If you do come to before you're on a boat headed to China, you're in the dark and you don't have your shoes and there's broken glass littering the floor. So
wow.
maybe it's something like that. So this, in a way, it's not anything new. I mean, people have been taking other people for nefarious reasons
Sure.
for over a century, or probably longer than that.
And we have a lot of people on here who have watched your documentary. So I'm actually going to pull the link up to that here in just a few minutes because, like I said, the sites that you have are just wonderful. Is it in most cases there's water involved? Does that seem to be the case?
And then the smiley face killers, yeah, they'll
Okay.
find them in a body of water, and there'll be smiley face graffiti nearby. Now that's a bone of contention with a lot of people that don't buy the theory. The smiley face is the probably the single most popular piece of graffiti in the country and probably the world. The smiley face been around since probably the 60s or 70s, the hippie era. But it's a little too cut and dried, though, that where these bodies are found, there will be a smiley face nearby. They even think that it may have been put there afterwards, like that they came back after the police have found the body and then leave a smiley face. It's almost like a symbol. There's process known as hobo chalking, also known as war chalking, and things like that. The people that used to hobo and ride the rails, they would mark places. They had a specific shorthand, and people that knew what to look for would think, okay, there's a kind lady at this house that'll give you food, or there's a bad dog here that will try to bite you. And so it's almost something like that. And then with the war chalking in big cities, people do that where there's open Wi-Fi that you can
Hmm.
use. There'll be markings on a building if you know what to look for, where you can get on Wi-Fi for free. So, who's to say that it's not some kind of shorthand, that it's a group or even just a couple of people that are committing these murders for sport, for fun. That's one of the theories, that they meet on the dark web and that they coordinate. And I mean, getting pretty deep in theory country here, but until we have an answer, till we have proof one way or the other, any theory is just as valid as another.
That's right. And as far as yourself, because you've been researching it for so long and have seen a lot of these stories, is there a theory that you tend to lean more to? I mean, do you believe that it is supernatural in nature, that it may be animal related? I mean, there's there's just they're so odd and so different with all of them.
Yeah.
What's your
Well,
theory?
there's so many different variations. I don't think there's one blanket thing that covers everything. There are people that go into the woods intending to never come out. But the thing that always gets me about that is, if you can, how can you get into, say, a national park or somewhere like that and get to a place to end your own life where your body will never be found? Now, there is animal predation and things like that. As I stated earlier, they don't eat your clothes, they don't eat your boots, they don't eat your backpack. There's usually some sign. And when there is an animal involved, there's signs of a struggle. There's DNA
Hmm.
and forensic evidence. There's blood. There's a mess. Now, they may chew on your clothing and stuff. A lot of times, when they're looking for somebody that's gone missing, they suspect a bear or a big cat. The park rangers and forestry service people will examine the scat from big
Hmm.
animals to see if there's any human remains, bones, clothing, things like that in there. So that's probably the least likely to me, is the animal attacks. Um, because number one, if an animal does attack you, it's not going to completely eat you. Now, other
Right.
animals may help it, but big cats usually will cache their kills up in a tree, whereas a bear kind of like to bury theirs, or put it in the bushes. And just a lot of people, that's just a catch-all. Oh, it was a bear. Bear got him, or oh, it was a mountain lion. But just when you go out there and you study these cases and you see, uh, I'll be kind to say their animal predation is a messy thing.
Mhm.
Plenty of evidence. I've seen pictures of where there were animal attacks and stuff, and yeah, it's obvious that something went on there with an animal. I mean, even if there's just bones and things left, there's tooth marks and claw
Mhm.
marks and things like that. So that's probably the least explanation to me. But again, when you get into the realm of the supernatural, some of these are just so strange and so macabre
Mhm.
that it boggles the mind. Like I talked about the people that found in boulder fields, a
Mhm.
lot of times they look as if they've been dropped from a considerable height when there's no height to be dropped from. It's just a boulder field out in the middle of nowhere. But interesting thing I ran into in my research, the Algonquin Indians
Mhm.
in New England have a theory or a legend about creatures that look like rocks, and they have the ability to open up and swallow people and then crush you to death and then spit you back out. Well, if you'd been
Wow.
inside something that looked like a rock and it crushed you to death and then spit you back out, you might look like you
Yeah.
had fallen from a distance. And there's a really interesting case from it's the Bennington Triangle area of Vermont, I believe, where a guy that was missing was later found, and they said it looked like something huge had crushed him to death, but he was just out in the middle of the woods. There was nothing there to crush him.
Wow. Um, so I mean that the ones I think that kind of really get me too are the ones that they do find the people and they either have missing time
Mhm.
or they have I know there was one that I was reading about not too long ago where the girl had she was going to school to study or going to the Starbucks and she went in a completely different direction, just abandons her car, and then they end up finding her in the woods. I wanna say that this one happened it was either in the Mount Shasta area or
Mhm.
it was in the Northwest, and, they found her, like, 3 or 4 days later, and she was just kind of sitting there in the woods like she hadn't done anything or moved in, like, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
Those are the ones that are weird to
yeah.
me.
There are a lot of cases like that where the people either won't talk about it or claim that they have no knowledge of where they were. There was a firefighter from Niagara area in Canada that went missing while skiing, and they found him. I believe it was several weeks later in California, still
Yeah,
wearing his ski gear, but he had a new phone and a haircut that he had
saw that
no
one.
idea. He didn't know. I had no remembrance of buying a phone or getting his hair cut. That's the really strange cases like that, the ones where they don't have a memory, or sometimes if it's very small children that they can't articulate.
Yeah.
Um, a common one that you hear a lot is a kid goes missing in the woods, turns back up, and they say that a bear took care of him. Uh,
Yes.
I just, I've been in the woods. I've been around bear. I've yet to see a bear that's going to hold hands with a little kid or cuddle with a little kid
Mhm.
or pick berries and feed him or snuggle with him. In cases like that, I tend to lean toward Sasquatch or Bigfoot or something like that. If you're
Mhm.
a little kid and you have no idea, no reference, no frame of reference for that type creature, and it's big, it's hairy. But
Mhm.
little kids have said that, there was a bear that walked on two legs that held my hand and took me in a cave and kept me warm and fed me berries until you found me. And talking about Mount Shasta there, that's one of the strangest of all is the robot grandma story. And we've covered that in one of our
Yes.
videos where a little boy went missing on Mount Shasta, and then they found him later. And at another time, his grandma's name was Kathy, but he called her Grandma Cappy. And he said, I don't like the other grandma. And she thought he meant his mother's mom. And she said, "Oh, what's wrong with so and so?" And he's like, "No, the other grandma Cappy." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You remember when I was lost in the woods and you couldn't find me?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, there was you came up to me, but it wasn't you, and you took me back to this cave, and eventually somehow he determined that she was a robot. And the cave that she took him into there on Shasta, there were cobwebs and skeletons and weapons, rusted weapons, and backpacks and people's belongings and stuff, and people that looked to be frozen. And he said, you tried to get me to poop on a piece of paper, or robot grandma did, and I wouldn't do it. And she got mad because I wasn't cooperating, took me back on the trail and left me and said, just wait here, somebody will find you. And that's where they found him. But then the strange thing about that, she contacted her son and said, what are you letting this kid watch? And he's telling all these wild stories. We told the parents that too. And then grandma, the actual grandma, she thought back, like previously,
Mhm.
her and a friend had been camping in that same area. And one night they heard some sort of disturbance outside the tent, and all she remembered seeing was red eyes. The next morning, she woke up face down on the ground several yards away from the tent, and later discovered that she had a puncture wound in the back of her neck. So that almost sounds like some sort of alien
Yeah.
technology or something. They took her DNA and made a robot clone of her, which lives in a cave on Mount Shasta. And believe it or not, that wouldn't be the wildest story off Mount Shasta. I've got a video on my 13 Past Midnight, which is my personal channel,
Mhm.
about some of the strange goings on Shasta, Lemurians, ascended masters, UFOs, New Age occult activities, all kinds of things up there. And the strangest Bigfoot sighting that I've ever heard of is from Mount Shasta. Lady claimed that one year, I think it was 19, I want to say 62 or 63, she saw a female Bigfoot giving birth on the shoulder, on the slope on Mount Shasta. And then the next year in the same area, another lady saw a female Bigfoot nursing a baby Bigfoot. So to me, sounds like it was probably the same Bigfoot. But Shasta's just, it's one of those weird places. It's got an aura to it. I've spent some time there. The town of Shasta, and then it's close to aptly named Weed, California. A lot of New Agers, a lot of reading rooms and crystal shops and things there. But there's a strange energy there.
And I wanted to share your page here, because we also had a comment. Let me find that as well, because I'm moderating the comments and all this over here, so I want to make sure I don't lose anything. Um, we've got here a question from Caleb. He says, "Is there a chance?" He says, "Steve, do you have anything special in the works for the missing persons or the mystery channels coming up that you're excited to talk about?"
Um, I've got a couple of things that I'm really excited about, but we're not really ready to talk about it at this point. But there's some big stuff coming up over there. Something that we've had a lot of people ask for. That's kind of a new special series that just I think is absolutely going to blow up. But
Awesome.
watch over the next week or so. We've got stuff coming out, and it'll be amazing. That's how Missing Persons and Mysteries. 13 Past Midnight, like I said, that's my personal channel. Go live over there every night. We just kind of talk and chat for an hour or so, and then I play usually 7, 8, 9, 10 hours worth of ghost stories that are in the public domain from LibriVox.org. Where they take books that are in the public domain, and then they have volunteers come in and narrate them, and then they release those narrations back in the public domain. Tonight will be night 356 in a row, and that comes on at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11
Okay.
Eastern. We changed the times there. It used to actually be at midnight Pacific, which was like 3 a.m. for the East Coast, and having a lot more fun now going earlier. But
Well, and I gotta say, you've got a wonderful narration voice.
well, thank you.
Like I said, since I've found your channel and everything, I'm excited about everything that I've got to listen to now. I'm gonna pull up the other one here. Let's see, your other page. So, um, and you said the one that I just showed, that one is every night you go
Yeah,
live.
every
Okay.
night we go live on there, and then I do some stuff during the weekends. Been showing matinee movies on Saturday and Sunday like really, really bad movies, so bad they're good, and have a lot of fun with that. So just that's kind of my sandbox over there, my playground where I just go and goof around and talk to my friends. But
And and let's talk a little bit about your missing persons mysteries page. What all can people find on this page?
oh gosh, there's a lot of playlists there if you like to play stuff that will go for hours and hours and hours. I know we've got one playlist that's over 6 hours long. A lot of people tell me they like to listen to my voice if they want to sleep or if they have PTSD or fibromyalgia or chronic pain. A lot of people like that say my voice helps them relax. So that's where those really long playlists come from. And the focus will always be missing persons and mysteries, or missing persons rather. The mystery side of that, we take a little leeway with that. You see there, I've got a series that done a couple parts to the Dark Travels, Strange
Mhm.
Places. I've got Bohemian Grove and Denver International Airport, some things like that. Occasionally we get into the paranormal over there, but most of the time I save that for 13 past midnight. So just so that we can concentrate on the missing people. That's really what it's all about. If we can help one family bring their loved one home or get closure, then it's all worth it. Somebody asked in the chat if we've ever helped find a missing person. People that we've made videos about have been found. I don't know. We can't claim any uh, thing on that other than we helped boost the signal. Never had
Sure.
anybody say, because of your video, I saw this guy and recognized him and called the police. But that would be ideal. We do like to work with the families a lot of times. In this case, I've got an interview tomorrow I'm doing with a guy that's missing in Colorado that we're talking to his sister to try to figure out what happened to him. Oh, Jim Cody there, Copper Ridge Cemetery, still active in Carms. Yeah, that's a creepy place. I tell you what, I've got some videos on 13 past midnight about that. I still enjoy getting out and doing the paranormal stuff too. But
Well, and that's the thing, and we'll talk briefly about your books here. The one that so I've been kind of reading on started on a couple of them. I started reading on your My Strange World, and then also the national park disappearances, the Smoky Mountains one. And I mean, what I really liked about the National Park Mysteries one is it's not just the disappearances, but also the mysteries. A lot of great paranormal and
yeah,
mysterious stories about the Smoky
that's
Mountains.
the first
Yes.
one I did in that series. And since I'm familiar with the Smokies, and it is the most visited national park in the country, I chose to write about it first. And it's got those disappearances, some of those that we just talked about, but it's also got unsolved murders, it's got hauntings, it's got just creepy stuff. I mean, there's
Yes.
theories of feral cannibals that live in the park. I talked about that in there. People worry about bear attacks and things going in the Smokies. Well, since the inception of the park in, I believe it's 1934, there have been exactly 5 deaths by bear. But during that same period, there's been over 50 deaths from plane crashes. So if you go to the Smokies, don't worry about the bear. Just don't fly over it in a Piper Cub or something, and you're a lot
Well,
safer.
I go to the Smoky Mountains a lot because whether I'm down here in the Chattanooga area or if I'm up at the historic jail in Huntsville, I'm only about an hour and a half away from the Smokies, and
Yeah.
so I love going over there any opportunity I get. And so once I started reading that book, it's like, okay, I want to go to some of these different locations, and I
Oh, there's
love
so many
absolutely
haunted places there. Cades Cove
yes.
and the North Shore of Fontana Lake are, in my opinion, arguably the most haunted places in the Smokies. And there's places out there where you can camp, I mean, right next to an ancient graveyard. And I've found old graveyards there while hiking that aren't even marked sometimes. But there's a weirdness up there. Cades Cove, in particular, a lot of people go there in the fall to see the foliage. It's like an 11-mile loop. They let cars go through there certain days. I think it is now, but it's a strange place at night. Technically, it closes at dark, but there are ways.
Right. Well, and I like too how you, at the end of each story, I love this. At the end of each story, you talk about either you have the way to connect with that location, or if it is, you have recommendations as far as if you want to investigate with either, book a room. Don't I love how you're, don't trespass. I
Yeah,
love how you do that. You promote, but you also, share that story, because I know
yeah.
that's a big thing with urbexers and investigators of just
Mhm.
nothing's
You know,
private
some
anymore.
some places are more open to it, and
Mhm,
then other places don't even want to talk about it. Understandably, if you um, so they talked about the Riverside or the I can't remember the name of the hotel now, River's Edge,
mhm.
something like that, where the little girl fell off the balcony
Yes.
and they've seen her ghost there. Yeah, they're not going to, if you go in the lobby and start talking about that and stuff, they're going to throw you out. But other places, like the can't think of the name of the
Like the
place here.
Holiday Inn one,
The
and
Holiday Inn, that's actually gone. Part of the,
yep.
the back building is still there, but that one, there was a murder there unsolved. Well, they knew who did the murder, but a lot of things there. And then another one. A lot of these places have kind of vanished over the midst of time. The Rocky Top Motor Lodge.
Yes.
There's a famous murder there back in the '80s, and they'd have partial apparitions, and you
Yes,
can
the
see it
phantom legs.
granite legs, yeah, running around the. There was a water feature out at the back of the hotel, and to me, I don't know what it is, but a partial apparition like that is 10 times more frightening
Yes.
than seeing a full bodied apparition. But
I totally agree, and like I said, I can't wait to sit down and finish reading these books, because they make me they make me wanna travel,
yeah,
and go up
um,
and check some of
the
those
next
out.
volume in that was covered California, particularly Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. And I could have done several books on California. There'll probably be another California book. Got my own experiences from Joshua Tree there, and then Bill, the other half of Missing Persons and Mysteries, he actually went missing for 5 days in Joshua Tree and had really strange encounter with some kind of beings that looked like alien grays. His stories over there on the channel, and then the most recent one is the Pacific Northwest. I cover cases here in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. So really good hauntings
Nice.
and stuff in here, in addition to the missing person cases.
And we've got links. I did just share some links into the comments over here, but I'm going to go back in the show notes there and also share your links. But why don't you tell folks where they can purchase your books at?
They're available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, as my publisher likes me to say. But they're available in ebook and paperback format. And a little bit later on, when I get the time to do it, I'm going to record audible versions.
Oh,
Everybody
nice.
has asked for that. My first book, Strange Things in the Woods, when I first signed with my publisher, they didn't know that I did the narration thing,
Mhm.
and they hired somebody else to narrate it. And I've had so many people rip me apart, like, I bought your Audible book, and that's not you narrating it. So I'm going to redo it. I mean, the guy did a good job, but everybody's like, well, he's good, but he's not you. They wanted to hear me. So, and
Oh, you've gotta
indeed,
have your voice. Gotta have your voice.
you
'Cause
know,
now that I've talked to you, when I read your books,
you can
I
hear me
can I
reading.
can hear you. Yeah, and like I said, I love the style, and I highly recommend, if you are interested in, ghost stories, missing, disappearances, national parks, that sort of thing. If you are interested in that, I highly recommend you check his books out, because they're wonderful to read, and, I'm
Yeah,
seeing a
just
bunch of other
I'm surprised at the
stories.
success of these. Every single one of them has been a bestseller. Went to number one on charts, and then that when a new book comes out, it helps the older books too, like Strange Things in the Woods. It went
Mhm.
back up to number one after this Pacific Northwest book was released. So I just, I appreciate. I never thought that so many people would read these stories and enjoy my narration stuff. We just passed 140,000 subscribers on
Nice.
missing persons mysteries. We get about 1.5 million views a month. So, you
Nice.
think about that, that's almost scary that many people listen to,
It is, and, and that's I definitely encourage you guys go and sub his channels and, check his stuff out, because they're very good, and, like I said, I'm excited I'm really excited about Strange Things in the Woods because as we were talking before the show, there's some stories from my hometown up there in, the Northeast Tennessee area.
Yeah, that was years in the making. That was a lot of those people that I collected those stories from in there have passed on. But that was the whole idea. I knew that if I
Mhm.
didn't write those down and didn't preserve those, they'd probably die with me because a lot of times that was, I'd sit down. What have you ever seen in the woods? What happened to you? And I would get a first person account that sometimes maybe their own family had never heard or didn't care about.
Right.
So
Well, that's what I always say. I always say my grandmother, that's where I got my love for
yeah,
all of this from
same.
hearing her.
My grandmother
And
was a self-proclaimed gypsy witch. I don't know where they got the gypsy part. Like I said, they came over from England and landed in Cades Cove. I think at some point there's probably a Romania connection or something in there, but she had a superstition for everything. She knew
yes.
every haint, booger, scary thing in the woods from all the way from Cades Cove into Knoxville. She could tell you about every gray lady, every crybaby bridge, every vanishing hitchhiker, uh, anything. And that was when I really got the idea. It was at her funeral. She died when I was 13 years old. And that was, I mean, obviously, since she was deceased, that was the stillest I'd ever seen her. She was always doing something, little bitty things. She probably didn't weigh 89 pounds, but she looked like a witch. And I was afraid of her when I was a small child. And I wish I'd had at least another 13 years to spend with her.
Yes.
But at her funeral, I kind of had the just it hit me like all those stories, everything she ever told me, it's right there with her. So I kind of assumed that mantle onto myself, going, I'm going to be the one to write these down. So because there was a lot of stuff that, as far as I know, she never told. She had 10 kids. She had my mom and 9 boys. And so I had a hard time getting away with anything because my mom knew every trick in the book. But I was the favorite grandchild because when I was born, according to my grandmother, I had a caul over my face, or born with a veil over my
Veil.
face. All that
Yes.
is amniotic sac. But in
Mhm.
Appalachia, that marks you. You're a special
Mhm.
child, and so she never
Mhm.
let me forget it. And I was the one. I was the only grandkid out of no telling how many, because all those uncles were married at least once. Some of them several times. So I had a lot of cousins, but I was the only one that had the veil. So she would get me alone and tell me all this stuff, make me repeat it back to her. And like I said, it just scared the devil out of me. I was anxious to get away from her.
Well, good for
But
you for having the presence of mind at that young of an age to write this stuff down, just because I mean you're right. Once those people pass on, a lot of the time
yeah,
those stories pass on with them. And I always say my grandmother was a walking Firefox book. And
yeah,
it's
love
it's
those Firefox
yes.
series, the stories in there. And then there used to be a guy that wrote in the Knoxville News Sentinel called Bert Vincent. Have you ever read any of his books?
I've not read any of his books, but I've seen some of his articles.
Yeah, he took over Carson Brewer's old column there in the News Sentinel, and he wrote a lot about legends and scary stuff. He wrote other stuff too, but uh, find his books. You can get them on Amazon, but
Okay.
they're along the same line as the Foxfire stuff.
I love that. And I'm just looking here. I did see a comment. What do you? I know there's certain things you can't talk about. You're going to be
Mhm.
on um, another show coming up here. What, next week?
Yeah, the Sarah Jane there, and
Yes, I
I
was
can't.
looking for that comment.
Yeah, the 12th, I'm going to be on with her. I'm really looking forward to that too. I if there's anything I enjoy as much as narrating and writing these books and stuff, it's going on shows like this and talking about it and meeting the people that read it and the people that listen to it. That's one of the reasons I have that 13 past midnight channel where I can just go on and interact with the audience sometimes for hours, and I get a lot of
Yes.
ideas that way. People, can you cover this? Can you do this? Have you heard about this case? So I think Sarah Jane, correct me if I'm wrong. Paranormally Blonde, I think, is the name of her show.
Yes, yes, and a great group of ladies. You're going to enjoy chatting with them. They're always a lot of fun, and we've got some of the folks in here in the chat room that come on their show as well. So you're going to enjoy it, and I know that the other folks that aren't here are going to enjoy seeing you on their show as well. So
Awesome. And Eric Freeman Sims there in the chat. I know he's been on your show before,
yes,
and I've been on his show. He's got a great, great podcast. Go check him out.
he does. He has great guests on there, and actually, and that's I had listened to his episode where you were on that. Well, you've been on there several times, and I really really enjoyed that. And like I said, I've been wanting to talk about the missing 411 and the disappearances in the national parks and stuff for a very long time. I could sit here and talk to you for hours because just all the variety of things that you cover, I absolutely love all of them. And I'm not as much into the cryptid side, or at least I guess I'm not. That's not my field of study. I'm
Yeah.
interested in it, but I don't follow it as much. And from what you talk about that, I mean, you make it really interesting.
Oh, well, thank you.
So yeah, I could sit and talk to you a long time. We're gonna wrap things up here in just a few minutes. Anything else you got going on that you can talk about that you want to
Um,
promote?
that's it for right now. So, like I said, we've got a very interesting series coming up over on missing persons and mysteries, and I'm unfortunately not at liberty to say too much about it. But it's something a lot of people have asked for. It's something that's very timely and something that needs to be brought to people's attention.
Well, you heard it. Go sub to his channels and keep an eye out for when he puts this big announcement out. And
And
we'll be
for
looking
my
forward to it.
people that are here watching, if you're not sub to Miranda and Ghost Biker here, show her some love and subscribe. She has a
Thank
lot
you.
of good shows on here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time, Steve. I'm going to definitely want to
Oh,
have
I
you
love it.
back here in the future to
Anytime.
talk about some different things. And thank you all so much in the chat room for your great comments, your questions, and for bearing with me. Like I said, I'm a solo show here. And so I'm trying to have a conversation, trying to man the chat room and I hope I didn't miss anyone's comments and questions. So again, thank you guys for being so wonderful. And I'm just going to throw a couple dates out here, a few little housekeeping things. We do have the calendar for the Ghost Biker Garage for season 2. We do have that booked up through April. And next week, we're going to actually have the guys from Fallen Hour on. They have a great podcast. If you haven't checked them out, I was on their show back during October. Marcus and Cedale, they're awesome guys, and we've got a lot of great things to talk about next week. So that will be next week at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and then we're going to round the month out with Mike Ricksecker the next week and Chet Guthrie. So some great guys that are going out, doing things, traveling, got books out, other videos, that sort of thing. Also be on the lookout for Ghost Biker Exploration Season 4 season finale. I'm hoping that that's going to release by the end of the month. It's quite an in-depth season finale, so it's taken a little bit of time to get that together. So season 4 season finale announcements coming on that soon, as well as some different events that's going to be coming up here during the first quarter of the year. So we're working on getting those checked out. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, thank you all so much, and be on the lookout for more announcements coming this week. But otherwise, I hope everyone stays safe and stays warm out there. So have a great night, guys.